site. Second thing, I am also the curator of Indian Steps Museum, which is located on the York side of the river. And I'll talk to you a little bit about it in my presentation. It's a over a 100-year-old old stone semi-mansion, and it's very unique, very eccentric, has over 10,000 artifacts literally embedded in the walls, inside and out. It's eclectic. You've never seen anything like it. And it's the first Native American museum in the country. Third thing, I also work with Society of Pennsylvania Archaeology, Chapter 28. I'm the vice president there. And we've done many excavations through that chapter. So I'm pretty well-rounded. I'm also going to be going to Towson University. Hopefully my goal is to get my doctorate or at least my master's in forensic anthropology. My background is I have several other masters in nursing, biology, medtech, histology, now anthropology, and social science. So you can see I'm a professional student. So I have, like, my husband is online here with us, so he'll tell you I'm great at Jeopardy, but I can't make $1. Okay, so that's my problem. I'm overly qualified. There you go. I was giving me the thumbs up. So I just love knowledge. I love sharing. So I hope this evening will help you get you a little excited about what we're doing and hopefully network with all of you. The most important thing right now is I want to give you a clip. It's a general overall clip of the Susquehanna Valley. And I think it's like eight or 9 minutes. And what I would like to do is have Browen show you that clip. And then after the clip, then we're going to talk details. But this video that we created, I created, is pretty interesting and it's entertaining. So Browen, would you please do the video for us?
I'd be happy to, Debbie. And when we show the video, it's helpful if everybody kind of goes off of their video feed. It helps with the bandwidth and showing the video across all folks. So if you can go ahead and stop your video, and I'll start the main video.
The Susquehanna River. This is a river that's 444 miles long. It's the largest river on the East Coast, and it started from upstate New York into the Chesapeake Bay. It was actually known in ancient times as the Indian Highway. Pennsylvania archaeologists have a way of establishing a timeline, and they delineated in Pennsylvania into 5 basic categories. It's Paleo Indian, Archaic, Transitional, Woodland, and Contact Period. Let's talk first about the Paleo Indian. The earliest evidence in Pennsylvania where man has been hunting mastodon is actually 16,000 BC. This primitive man were still nomadic, and they were hunting big game animals. What they had are these long spears with a projectile point. The projectile point is called Clovis. This particular point is actually channeled or fluted. They were massive, and they were meant to take down big game. Then they had an atlatl, which would actually help increase the distance of the throw, because primitive man didn't want to get too close to their prey. So what they would do is they would try to increase their distance and take down the big animals. Next comes the Archaic Period. That starts around 8,000 BC. Still, these primitive people were in nomadic small bands, and they're still hunting and foraging for food. You might ask, well, what's the evidence that we had people back in those days? What did these ancient ones leave behind? Things such as hides and bones and grasses and wood, that decomposes very quickly in our acidic soils, especially here in Pennsylvania. So all they really did leave were the stone tools. The transitional period, which was 2000 to 1000 BC, here's where really big changes occurred. The actual blade on the spear itself became very long and very broad. They actually are called Susquehannock broad spears. Another big change in the transitional period came in the form of discovering soapstone. Soapstone is also known as steatite. What it is actually is a form of talc, and it's soft, it's able to be carved. So the ancient ones took this outcropping of this type of material, and they actually shaped cooking bowls so that they can actually cook over an open fire. The problem with stone tool technology, especially when the Native Americans were preparing their foods, there's a lot of grit that comes when grinding and preparing. What happens is a lot of these little bits of stone get into the food, and then when they were chewing, it would actually wear down their teeth, their enamel, and they would be exposed roots, therefore causing sepsis. The next period is the Woodland period. That's 1000 BC to 1550 AD. Now picture, these people are now beginning to settle down into small encampments, particularly around rivers and small streams. Their food source became a little bit more variety. It became increased because they started to become farmers. Here is where agriculture started to begin. So they had a variety that they were starting to actually grow some crops. The late Woodland period saw a great change. This is when the bow and arrow technology came. No longer were they using the big broad spears. Now the projectile point was now a small triangular shaped point, and it was made from various cherts in the area. The late Woodland also brought pottery. Since these tribes were now living in small hamlets or even longhouses, pottery was now used to store grains. They were also used as a cooking vessel, and even there's decorated ceremonial vessels. The progression of pottery went from steatite stone bowls to a flat bottom pot to a round bottom pot, and eventually it was discarded altogether, and that's where the brass kettles took their place. The contact period is marked by trade interactions. This occurs from 1550 to 1750. A remarkable change occurred within the Native American societies when they came in contact with the Europeans. As you advance in time, a lot of the native articles were replaced by European goods. In particular, the iron axes, the glass bottles and beads, colonial pipes, guns, and alcohol. The origins of the Susquehannock started in upstate New York. They had common roots with the Iroquois around 1450 AD. They started migrating south into the lower Susquehanna Valley. As they moved down the Susquehanna River, the first village they occupied was the Schultz site from 1525 to 1600. In fact, the Schultz site is directly across from the Blue Rock Heritage Center. Every 25 years, the Susquehannocks moved their village site. They moved either north or south, basically due to that they used up all the resources within a certain radius. In the village of Washington Borough, the warriors traveled down the Susquehanna River to meet Captain John Smith in 1608. They met on Garrett Island, which is at the head of the Chesapeake Bay, right around Port Deposit, Maryland. We do not really know what the Susquehannocks called themselves. In fact, Susquehannock was a descriptive term used by Captain John Smith's interpreter, and this interpreter was Algonquin. The French called the Susquehannocks the Andaste. The Dutch and the Swedes, well, they called them Minga. And it was a rather derogatory term. It actually means stealthy or treacherous.
But we English called them the Conestoga.
But for our purposes, we're going to call them the Susquehannocks. Most of us are familiar with the account between the 60 mighty Susquehanna warriors and Captain John Smith, where Smith describes the Susquehannock as giants. He said they have a big, deep voice, actually coming like out of a vault. They wore skins of bears and wolves. and they were accompanied by large clubs and bows and arrows. We know that from history that Smith likes to exaggerate. He'd like to sell the concept of colonization to the New World, but physical archaeological evidence, in the form of skeletons, show the average Susquehanna male around 5.6 feet and the female around 5.2. Trade goods. Native Americans' desire for beads in the form for decorations for their jewelry were actually sewn onto their clothing, or they wore them as necklaces. Trade goods also took the form of iron tools, brass kettles. But the Europeans, what did they want in return? Well, they wanted beaver furs, because back in England, the beaver hats were all the rage. The Susquehanna women made their pots out of clay coils. They added crushed shells to give it strength, and they paddled the exterior to smooth out the coils and expel air bubbles. They used bone tools. They inscribed intricate triangular lines, and they even formed human faces onto these high collars with rounded bottoms. Some forms of pottery even took on full figures demonstrating their artistic talents. Most of the highly decorated vessels were placed with their loved ones as grave offerings, or they were used as ceremonial vessels, which were to be in a prominent place in the Longhouse. Smith complimented the Washington Borough women potters, and he actually said they were the finest potters comparable to the men who were potters back in England. The Susquehannocks, they actually occupied villages on both sides of the river. But by 1690 to 1763, they ended up in Conestoga town, Lancaster County. By this time, the Susquehannocks converted to Christianity. They were in decline, both culturally and economically. They actually tried to sustain themselves as farm workers, domestics, or they even succumbed to selling handmade crafts such as brooms and baskets. 1763, a vigilante group called the Paxton Boys was formed to retaliate against local American Indians in the aftermath of the French and Indian War. On December 15th, activists blamed the Conestoga for helping the enemy and killing settlers. They actually found and killed 3 men, 2 women, and 1 boy. Officials in Lancaster, wishing to protect the remaining innocent Indians, gathered them into the county workhouse. But on September 27th, the Paxton Boys stormed the Lancaster jail and murdered at least 20 Native Americans, mostly women, children, and old men. The authorities looked the other way, and no one was ever prosecuted for this violent act.
All right, Debbie, it's back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Can we now, I want to show the slides. Okay, can you help me on that one?
Audrey, you cannot go outside. No, you don't want to go outside. It's wet.
Yep, let's go. Do the share screen like we did before?
Okay. And we're in, hopefully.
And we're in. Good job.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, folks, I wanted to show you that video. I just thought it was a good overall presentation to show the different time periods and how things have progressed. From this point on, I want to strictly restrict our questions to the Susquehannocks and where we go from here. So let's start out, number 1, with the first slide, and that's excavating the Susquehannock.
Debbie, quick interrupt. You have to go to slideshow and start the slideshow in your PowerPoint.
Okay. So go to slideshow.
Yeah, play from
Start.
There you go.
Is that better for you? Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody could hear?
We're good.
Okay. Let me go back one more. So I have several pictures here just to introduce you to what I do. I'm more than happy to get new people coming up from Baltimore. This is Indian Steps Museum. I have the website up there for those of you who'd like to come and visit us. It opens up May 1st and it's indiansteps.org. This is the little museum I was talking to you about. It's right on the Susquehannock. And there's over 10,000 artifacts embedded in the walls and in the stonework inside and out of this area. Dr. Barry Kent and I, within the last 5 years, we found 3 prehistoric sites that were registered. People think all this is the Susquehannock. It's not. It's actually archaic and transitional, most of these big tools. If you take a look on the left side here, there's called the Kiva. This museum was the first Native American museum in the country. And at first, this looks like a big mishmash of all different kind of cultures. But actually what it is it's called Pan-Indianism. And at that time, in 1912, is when groups got together, Native Americans, and they try to form various coalitions because they realized that their culture was declining and they wanted to help and network with each other. So this gentleman by the name of John Vandersloot, he made this monument, this home, all made out of stone to kind of capture his artifacts and to help and act as an ambassador. And he traveled all over the country. So I'm inviting all of you personally, May 1st, I'm going to give you our contact information to please come and visit us. It's a wonderful and very unique little museum. Oh, let me get... Second museum I'm the curator of is Blue Rock. This is now on the Lancaster side. And it was an old mill, as you can see here. And then there's a center right here where we have a heritage center. It's a huge complex, but it sits right on the Schultz site, which was a Native American Susquehannock village. And we are doing excavation here. We're starting it in September. And so those of you wanting to do excavation with us, please get in contact and we are more than happy. Everybody can still hear me? Hopefully.
Yes, good.
Okay. As we said in the video, Indian Highway, the way the Susquehanna has wandered down. And there are certain pathways, Indian pathways, but a lot of the Native Americans used their canoes. They came down the Indian Highway. Pennsylvania timeline. I've noticed that I've been doing archaeology about 10 years. None of these things are set in stone, depending on where you go. Everybody has a tendency to move these dates here and there. So just for those of you who are professional archaeologists, it's not set in stone. It depends. What we're going to talk about is the transitional period and then the woodland period and contact. So that's what we'll discuss. Contact period for our area, 1550 to 1750. Lower Susquehanna. We've already mentioned in the video, typical Susquehannock. We know what the Dutch call them. They were French. We call them Vandaste, Swedes. Truth is, nobody knows what they were called. And from various readings, we do know that they had a very deep voice, like they were coming out of a vault. And there's other recordings, or there's other records of that. But from Captain John Smith, he also made that awareness. The Susquehannocks were very warlike, and they would take over a territory very quickly. They're excellent hunters, excellent warriors. Here's the original document from Captain John Smith in his description in 1608. I encourage all of you to go ahead and actually read that in your spare time. It's pretty interesting. He really goes into detail about what the Susquehannock looked like. and about how long the tobacco pipes were, and talking about their calves or their legs, and they couldn't even get their arms, their hands around them. And the people, the Native American warriors they were talking about here were the Susquehannocks that lived up at Washington Borough. So we will later on show you exactly where that village site is. So when these people, just remember, where the natives were at the Washington Borough village, they came down and they met with Captain John Smith on an island. So here's the different village sites. They had common roots with the Iroquois. Very important. They were not part of the Susquehanna. They were not part of the Iroquoian Confederacy. When I started to do research, I thought Iroquois or Iroquois. No, you have to make a difference. There's Iroquoian speaking, but the Susquehannocks were not part of the Iroquoian Confederacy. And they did share a language, and they shared common roots with religion. Because you will see, as time went on, the Iroquois became the enemies of the Susquehannock. Let me go back to one slide. I think I have it here. Oh, here we go. At the end of Captain John Smith says they can make nearly 600 able-bodied men and are palisaded in their towns to defend them from the Massawomics, their mortal enemy. So who do you think the Massawomics were? They were the Susquehannocks. They were the Iroquois, upstate New York. These were the people who started to form the Iroquoian Confederacy. Here's the village sites. Picture the Susquehannocks. We don't know why they left that area, started coming down. They first settled on the Schultz site, which is on the Lancaster side of the river, 1500 to 1525. Then they went from the Schultz site, they went to Washington Borough. I happen to love Washington Borough. The artifacts out of there are spectacular. A lot of interest going on there, and I will show you some of the things that we excavated from Washington Borough. The next site is the Strickler site, also on Lancaster side. Then they left, went across the river, and they landed in York County. And if anybody's familiar with the Susquehanna National Heritage site, it is near Long Level. And there's actually a north and south. There's a Leaphart site and an Oscar Leaphart site. So there are two Susquehanna palisaded villages on the York County side. The next one is the Void. And then nobody knows really where they went. 25 years, nobody knows where these people went. I think when I talked to Dr. Bob Wall, I don't know if this is part of the Barton side or Dr. Barry Kent, he always speculated it was in Columbia, and they just haven't found the site. But there is a void there. And as you know, most village sites are only between 25 years old because they already exhausted their supplies, and it was too far to go away from camp to gather wood and things like that. So every 25 years, they moved. Just to give you a brief idea, these are all the different sites that are registered with the PASS files. PASS file stands for Pennsylvania Archaeology Site Survey, and this is just in the area of Blue Rock, Lancaster area, where I'm familiar with of excavation. These are all the PASS files, and they start off by 36, meaning Pennsylvania, LA, Lancaster County, and then your site demarcation. Washington Borough is 36, LA 8. The island that Captain John Smith visited the Susquehannocks was Garrett Island. Everybody familiar with Garrett Island? Garrett Island is right across the island from the Tidewater Grill. It's the first island that pops out when you're going from Chesapeake Bay right up the Susquehanna River. It all kind of names. Today it's known as Garrett Island. It was also called Claiborne's Island back in the day. Our Pennsylvania chapter did look for the Claiborne's fort. We found everything else but. We found paleo, we found all these old colonial cellars, but we didn't find any traces of Claiborne's fort. And that's because I think the soils are so acidic. It could have been just a couple of woods. Who knows how small that would be? But we didn't find any traces of Claiborne's fort, unfortunately. We found everything else. And here's where they went to trade on this particular island. Susquehannock Village, they have specific criteria. You all know about the Longhouses, okay? They had palisaded forts. In Washington Borough, and I'll show you a little further on, they had double protective fences around Washington Borough. And these were the people who met Captain John Smith. It was the Washington Borough Susquehannocks that met Captain John Smith. The Longhouses are matrilineal organized. They could have anywhere from 2 to 3 different holes, each one having an extended family. Life was very well regulated. Problem is that they had to go outside this palisaded area to find food and wood for food and shelter. Here's one. This is up in Hans Herr Museum, Lancaster. I suggest all of you go and take a look at the Hans Herr. They did a great job of reproducing this. This bark that they put on the Longhouse, that's fake, but it's fabulous. I mean, you have to touch it to feel that it's actually some type of a composite. And interesting too, whenever we get up there, Tiffany Fisk, my friend, she's the curator there. She has a lot of good detailed work that she can tell you all about the Longhouses, how they were ventilated out so you don't fill up with smoke, things like that. Here's just a rendition of what the inside of a Longhouse looked like. This is the pots. They're famous for Washington Borough pottery. They actually had different shelving units. They would hang things up above, and they almost had like 3 to 4 different types of center hole fire pits that they were able to cook from. Give you a little idea in time in history here. In the 1500s in our area, meaning lower Pennsylvania, early northern Maryland, there was a group of Shanks Ferry. They were displaced by the Susquehannocks. So you can see that the Shanks Ferry started doing some native contact with metal, and then with the Monongahela, 1550, at this area in the Susquehannock, Lancaster side, they started really embracing the metal, brass kettles, glass. And then here now, 1600, you can see they were really casting off their native culture and embracing the European. 1650, they started becoming into refugees. By 1763, you had colonial. All their pipes were replaced by colonial pipes, glassware, dishes, flintlock. So I just wanted to show you the progression of trade goods that were coming up. The Washington Borough in particular, women were noted for their bowls, their Washington Borough bowls. And in this area, the men, they were wanting to, at this point, early point in time, they wanted to get the iron axes. So theirs was starting to get a collision of different trades, different cultures, disease came with that. beaver wars. So there was a lot of anxiety, convulsion, coming together for something that these two cultures were starting to assimilate and also clash. There's myself and my husband. This is Washington Borough, right in Lancaster County. We are on the Washington Borough site. And as you can see, it's right up here. This is Washington Borough. York County's on the left side, Lancaster County's on the right. And they have so many sites on Lancaster County. And I know the reason why. If anybody's from Lancaster County, especially Washington Borough, you've got the best soil. The way the alluvial wash comes from that Susquehanna River, from what I understand, the Washington Borough is the capital of the tomatoes. And there's a lot of farming there, corn, especially tomatoes. The soil is so enriched, it's beautiful. Go on the York County side, it's all this mica schist. It's very rocky. It doesn't have the nice, especially on the river banks, it doesn't have the nice, smooth, gradual soil that Washington Borough has. This was very interesting. Those of you who are archaeologists, we found the western palisade fence. As we were coming down onto this site, we were tracing all the post hole moles. Some we thought were fish racks. Then we found out that this particular village had a double palisaded fence. And here you see are the post hole moles. Those of you who are archaeologists who would like to assist, very important, a very specific way you need to excavate this. Because remember, once you excavate a site, you've destroyed it. So we have to be very careful. And especially for the Susquehannocks, we are wanting to know the actual measurements of the village, what kind of fencing posts they had. And we also found evidence of bastions on both sides. So little by little, we're actually confirming what we've seen. All right, here's the fun part. Here are some of the artifacts that we found. The first one is a Washington bowl, clay bowl. This is a Susquehannock, we call them spirit face. We found a lot of rolled beads, a lot of bells, bone combs, effigies here, lots of beads. I'll talk to you about that in a second. Pipes, a lot of animal teeth, canine, bear, with drilled holes, and turtle effigies and lead effigies. I wanted to show you here. I don't know if you can see it that well, but these are called chevron beads. This is what we excavated. Can you see that? This is what we've excavated from Washington Borough. These are your coveted chevron beads. There are also melon beads, things like that, and a lot of teeth that were drilled. So that just came out of the pit I was in, was about, I would say 3 pits. And that was about maybe, each pit was, our diameters were like, I would say in English, 5 feet by 5 feet. So that came out of 3 of them, and we sifted for those. The majority of beads were actually seed beads. Do you see in your upper right corner, there is a bear, a picture of a bear? That's soapstone. And there's a lot of carvings of either an otter, a bear, or a wolf. And then here, my husband found a beautiful triangle right here. Let me go to the next one. We found jinglers. I don't know if you folks know what jinglers are or tinklers. These were the cut up pieces from the brass pot, and they would sew them on their clothing so that they would jingle. So it was pretty cool. Then we found a lot of little brass bells and tinklers or jinglers. Isn't this amazing? Look at this soapstone. The middle one, I think, is an otter. I don't think it's a beaver because they think the tail would be flatter. But these are awesome. And then you had the 2 other human effigies. And I thought they did such a remarkable job. This is not clay, this is soapstone that they carved. And you can't see it, but on the opposite end of these human effigies, they would put tobacco. So they would make an offering of tobacco. Clay pipes. We found clay pipes, not too many that were totally intact, but we did find a lot of clay pipes. And Iroquoian pipes, especially like this, the Susquehannock would always smoke with the effigy facing them. That's one of the telltale things when you go for clay pipes. It's the effigies always facing the smoker, just like this. Oh, this is your typical pipes. This is called a Susquehannock ring bowl, tulip pipe. Look at that little fox. They were just magnificent, exquisite artifacts. For those of you who are going to become archaeologists, or maybe like myself in the CAT program and you want to assist, I like to put this particular point in here because when you're looking at something, it's a puzzle and you don't know what you're looking at. So it's up to myself or another archaeologist, or you have to learn to train your eye. For example, see all these beads here? These all came out of Washington Borough. The predominant color of beads were blue coming out of the Susquehannock sites. There's some of your chevron beads I just showed you. Susquehanna broad spear. There's your jasper. All of a sudden, look at a Clovis. Where would you find a Clovis there? Fluted Clovis. Because a lot of these places, especially on the Lancaster side, were multi-layered because of that great soil coming and alluvial washes coming down off the Susquehanna. My specialty is bowls, pottery. How do I know that's Susquehannock? How do I know that's Shanks Ferry? So how do I know that's Cordmark? So these are the things that you really need to train your eye to know what you're looking at. Again, beads, very Strickler beads. This was on the site. Every site has their own specific bead. Washington Borough, a lot of these seed beads, these are mostly made in Dutch, England, Swedes. And then you have your typical Eastern Woodland Indians. It was from the whelk shell called quahog. That's where a lot of your treaties or wampum belts were made out of. Here you go. That's a little bit closer look of the things that I found. And look over here, brass pots, brass kettles. People thought that they thought, oh man, if they got these brass kettles, they were going to cook in them. They very rarely cooked in brass kettles. They took them and they cut them up. They made what they call spirals. They made all these little decorations. So you'll see jinglers. So I don't know really what a low percentage of they used for the brass kettles. I know they were used more for decoration as opposed to heating. Here's our specialty, my husband and I, how to recognize pottery. Schultzen sizing. These are all, see all these little tiny incisings here? These are called plots or plats. It tells a story. It tells what clan it's from. It tells what kind of temper. People think that you could just hurry up and coil this up and make these pottery for a day. It takes a couple of days. You cannot take a wet piece of clay and actually make this nice big high collar on it. It'll slump on itself. It's too heavy. My husband and I made hundreds of these things. We're writing a book on experimental archaeology, and we're taking the actual clay from the banks, roasting the temper, finding out the actual chemical composition, and we're reproducing it so that they could go into museums such as Indian Steps, Blue Rock, and even the State Museum, or anybody who would like to have something like that. This is Washington Borough. This is your typical Washington Borough pot. Round bottom, a little bit of a collar. Then you have your high collar. Oh, let me go back here. You have your high collar, and here's your signature. It's called the Washington Borough spirit-faced pot, spirit-faced effigy. This was only made between 1600 and 1625. If you're on any other site and didn't have this, I could very easily date that, but this is your signature piece. That's a Washington borough right there. And they're beautiful. They did a beautiful job of making these pottery. It's coil pottery, and they would take a stick or they would take fish bones and make these incisings. I even have a bowl that has the women's fingerprints right in there. And we actually lifted the prints. So I thought that was pretty cool. There's another form. Blue rock valance is what that's called. Isn't this amazing? Doesn't this look Egyptian? This is a full figure on pottery. I thought this is fabulous. I talked to Dr. Hirschbit at the State Museum. We always wondered why they put that V in there. Some people said, oh, it's to take the tension off the rim, but we don't think so. We think that actually represents like a shaman, where there's representing maybe a headdress or an antlers that they would use. And I'll show you a little bit later one of the other pots. But look at the full body of this. And you can't see this, but right underneath the legs here are holes that they can tie string or some kind of twine to hold something. And they would decorate these things. They would actually have little tiny holes in its feet, and maybe they would put feathers or some type of decoration in there. Here you go. There's a good example. Do you see that? Do you see that's a full figure there? These are not repair holes. These were used to put some type of decoration in. And it unfortunately is too far degraded. We thought we could do residue analysis and maybe find out maybe it's a feather residue or some kind of other precious metal or something, but it was too far degraded. But look at how wonderful these pots were formed. All by women, by the way. Here's my husband, Larry. He reproduces these things for the museum. And the basic concepts for Washington Borough spirit face pottery is rounded bottoms, high decorative collars, roasted shell for temper, geometric and sized patterns, and they're very decorative edges. Do you see on top of this feather, on top of the head here? That could also be, because this is an exact duplicate, they could even try to represent a feathered or some type of headdress there. Let's talk about briefly, because I know I'm running out of time. The Susquehannocks were attacked. They were, well, in fact, Baron, how much longer do I have?
You can keep going.
You sure? Just let me know when. I need to stop.
People will jump off if they have to, but you can.
Okay. This was a very sad situation. Those of you who are interested in the Massacre, there's a great book. It's by Jack Brubaker. It's called Massacre of the Conestogas. And there's 3 other authors that they have a little discrepancy, but basically the Susquehannocks, they were living in Conestoga town. They lost their culture. They were basically dependent on the white man's wares. They tried to sell brooms, make a marginal living. And as these Paxton boys came in, they blamed them for killing other white settlers back, by the western area, and they weren't. And it seemed like everybody turned their backs on these remnants of small people. And then they just came in, the Paxton boys, and scalped these. It was just men, old men, women, and children. It was on two different accounts, 2 different areas. I wanted to put this particular slide up. This is called Circle Legacy Center. I'm also their anthropological advisor. What I asked the question in the beginning, you told me an icebreaker, is anybody identifying themselves as Susquehannock? And in Pennsylvania, they are not a recognized entity. They're not a recognized tribe. But over the years, a lot of the Susquehannocks did survive, and they intermarried. So how much blood you have or whatever, doesn't matter. It's what you identify right now if you want to identify as Susquehannocks. But in Circle Legacy Center, there's many different tribes. And what they basically want to say to everyone now is they're still here. They did not become extinct. In fact, when you say, oh, the Susquehannocks went extinct, naturally their bloodline decreased and they intermarried. But they're still here, and a lot of them want to have their culture back. And so through Blue Rock Heritage, we now are offering all type of classes, how to do moccasins, all the natural and native arts and crafts that the Susquehanna did, like a porcupine quill weaving and things like that, brain tanning. So if anybody would like to ever join and look at their arts and culture, Circle Legacy. Once you go on their site or on any of the sites I gave you, we have a whole list of programs that comes up. My mentor, Dr. Barry Kent, he passed away 2 years ago. This is like the Bible to us. It's called Susquehanna Indians by Barry C. Kent. Excellent, excellent. Those of you who want to know more about Susquehanna Indians, that's where you go. Here's Barry when he was on the left-hand side. That's he, Steve Warfel, both of them are now gone. They did a wonderful job of excavating the Susquehannocks. And then Barry, before he passed away, there's another excellent book. It's called Jacob, My Friend. And anybody could write to me and I'll give them more detail. He was writing this, and this is what they call a historical fiction. I said to Barry, isn't that like mutually exclusive? What is a historical fiction? He said, well, you'll see, Deb, when you start reading it. And what it is, it's basically, if you were from the area or you're interested in the Susquehannocks, you would pick out the various areas of what he was talking about. It's an excellent book. The names may be fictitious, but the actual actions and where they are and place and time, their cultures, their rituals are spot on. So just because it's historical fiction, try it. It's a very good book. It's called Jacob, My Friend by Barry Kent. Okay. And I think that's it. I hope you had a little bit of entertainment tonight, and I would be more than happy to put my email or how you guys can contact me, questions. I hope you had a good evening with me. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Debbie, thank you so much. Could you stop share? We can all come back together. There are some questions, if you can entertain some.
Sure.
All right. Let me go back here. Catherine wanted to know the refugee human figure that you showed. Is it based on a real item? If yes, where is it located?
Which one is that? What refugee item?
Catherine, do you want to? Are you still on?
I am on, and I don't know the way I set up my. Oh, I guess the little green thing is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine. How are you?
When you had hello, how are you? When you had the colored blocks and you were showing the timeline with line drawings of
Yes, yes.
There was a human figure drawn in the refugee block, and I wondered if that was based on a real figure.
I don't know. I wouldn't know. That was done by Gary Fogelman, and that's done also by the PHMC. So I don't know if that was who drew that figure in. Sorry.
Thank you.
I do know that we cannot, because I also am with Circle Legacy, we cannot, especially in our museum, they had human skeletal remains, and they had a lot of pictures of various poses of human remains, and we took them out because that was not culturally sensitive.
Oh yes, but you've been showing some carved figures.
Right.
Right, and so I wondered if it was modeled after a carved figure.
It was, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll contact you later. And
please.
Okay, and we had Barrett was interested in the land where you're digging. Where is it? Who owns it? How do you
Sure.
get permission? Are there descendants?
Right. The Indian Steps Museum owns the property. It's private property owned by the Conservation Society of York County. When I came on board, we noticed that we wanted to know where all these artifacts were coming from. And because the story was that when Mr. Vandersloot back in the 1900s, when he was down and he was digging in his garden, he found all these main big stone tools. Well, that's not Susquehannock. These are tribes. These are not even tribes. These are clans. These are back in archaic, early transitional. So they were not tribes like we know today. So the land is privately owned, and I registered the sites with the Pennsylvania State Museum. In Lancaster, these were owned by Exelon previously now Brookfield, and we had permission to excavate there. But a lot of times we excavate on private property. So, and the artifacts, wherever they are, they go back to the property owner. That's how it is in Pennsylvania. And if we come upon any remains, we are to immediately stop. We have to call the state museum or the PHMC and the local coroner's office to decide if this is what type of remains this is. So that's we have a whole set of protocols when we do excavations. Did that help answer your question?
Yep. And Catherine is interested, who curates the Washington Borough material?
I do.
Oh, there you go, Catherine. You're
Right.
talking to her. Okay.
Right.
Let's see.
And Catherine, if you ever want to come up to Blue Rock, I have some things if you ever wanted to help me catalog. I do have a lot of really nice Washington Borough items, and also I need help with putting displays. So if you're looking for Washington Borough, Susquehanna in particular, Blue Rock is the way to go. If you're looking for really old big stone tools, Indian Steps Museum.
I'm looking for human figures,
Okay.
not skeletons, but sculpted human figures.
Okay. Are you an artist or anything that you would want to reproduce that, or?
No,
No. Okay.
I'm an archaeologist and I teach Native American art history.
Okay. So you're looking for effigies, things like that too?
Things like that, yes. And I'm doing a nationwide study of changes in human figure style.
Oh, then you need to contact me, Catherine. There was an archaeologist by the name of Gerald Fenstermacher. I don't know if you heard of him or not. He passed away, but he had tons of effigies carved in soapstone. And I'll get some of his papers out. I could help you with that.
Okay, thank you. I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Please. Okay, anybody else?
Yep. Kay Holcomb was interested. Did the Susquehannocks ever come farther south into Maryland near the Patapsco?
Yes. Dr. Bob Wall from Towson University. It's called the Barren Site. What had happened was, as these Susquehannocks were getting less and less, they went from the lower Leaphart site, which is on the York County side of the river, and they went somewhere. And there's rumors that they went down to Maryland because they wanted to have protection. And there is evidence of some of the remnants of the Susquehannock being at the Barton site. Elka, when you were with Dr. Wall, did you talk about that at all? And when you were with Dr. Wall?
I haven't talked to him for a long time,
Okay,
so I don't recall.
Right. So they took refuge in a fort, but is what I know, the actual Susquehannocks. But
Right.
When they were coming down and they were getting kind of scattered. So we don't know, remember with that void, there was a 25-year void. We don't know where those Susquehannocks went. Barry Kent thought it was under Columbia up by Marietta. Some people think it's more going down toward the Chesapeake Bay. We don't know, we never found it.
Patty was interested in why are so many artifacts found in one location, and why would such useful items and treasures be left behind?
Tell me again, Byron, I couldn't hear you.
Why are so many artifacts found in one location, and why did they leave all of these wonderful things behind?
Okay, a good question. Let's go from the time period. From archaic, you find very few things archaic, paleo, archaic, because these people are moving around. Okay, these are on the go. These are nomadic. It wasn't until the transitional period that they started going into little fish camps. Now let's talk about specifically Susquehanna. You will see on the Susquehannock, wherever a stream comes into the Susquehannock, you want to look there, because that's where these little fishing camps were, like overnight. And that's where you'll find their flint knives. You'll find some scrapers where they're scraping hides and things like that. Very few wooden items are ever found during transitional or anything early, because the soil is so acidic. So it just dissolves. So why is it left behind? Because anything that doesn't rot will stay. Okay, it's particularly stone tools. And then when you go now from transition to woodland, what's happening now? They're starting to grow corn. They're starting to grow beans. They're starting to grow squash. They're starting to go into village life. So if you have a concentrated village life, now you're going to realize they're going to be dropping things like that. So that's why you have a concentration of artifacts, because now it's contained into more of a village. Did that help? Did that answer your question?
And Bob wants to know, did the Susquehannocks do petroglyphs such as Indian rock? If so, when?
No, very good question. Thank you. The Susquehannocks did not do the petroglyphs. In our area, we have petroglyphs that were found near the near the Conowingo Dam, and that's called the Bald Friar petroglyphs. They were very unusual. They're a more geometric fish-like called the Bald Friar petroglyphs, and that whole area on Route 222, that's a very, very old site. Go further north, you're going to go to Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor has many artifacts, many petroglyphs. In fact, we did a documentary a little bit about that. Someday I'll talk to you about those petroglyphs, but they are not the Susquehannock. They were mostly done by the Algonquin. We don't know what tribe, but basically there was about 11 islands that have petroglyphs in the rock. They were not Susquehannock. And if you go to Blue Rock, which is really interesting, we have what they call a petroglyph on Walnut Island. Walnut Island, it looks like Chinese symbols. It looks like a big tic-tac-toe. I have it right in my center at Blue Rock. Nobody knows what these symbols mean. They're unlike anything anybody's ever seen on the East Coast. And unfortunately, it's all underwater because of the Safe Harbor on the Holtwood Dam. But if anybody's interested in petroglyphs, come and see them. They are really spectacular. But if you go up to Safe Harbor, some of you might kayak and see Big Indian Rock or Little Indian Rock. You'll see thunderbirds. You'll see pictures of a comet. You'll see the big shaman with the antenna and big hands, big feet, cupules, two big snakes, two big rattlesnakes. We were there, I believe it was on winter solstice. Sun comes right between those two rattlesnakes. That was documented. So a lot of them were perhaps cosmology or some type of timing. Could have been dream quests, but I just wanted to make a point. They were not done by the Susquehannocks. They were done much earlier, before the Susquehannocks got here.
All right. Are there any other questions for Debbie while we have her? I have put Debbie's email into the chat box. It's if you want to have that. She said that it was okay to do.
Please.
and email her. I agree, Joy. It was an excellent presentation. We learned a lot. And I have new places to go visit and explore once the pandemic is over.
Please do. In
And we
fact,
can-
because I am part of your group now, I was even thinking once COVID gets a little tamer, have a event. We'll have a club outing. I will take you to Indian Steps, give you a personal tour. We can have a nice picnic up there. It's beautiful grounds. So maybe our archaeology club can all get together and we go up there. It's right above right above the Maryland line is what it is, in Airville. So we can all take a nice trip up there and I'll play tour guide for you.
Well, count me in. I'm ready.
Okay.
Ilka, you want to say any parting words?
Thank you very much, Debbie.
You're welcome.
That sounds like it would be a great adventure one day. And we had talked previously before COVID of doing a tour with kayaks out on looking at the petroglyphs too. So
Safe Harbor?
whatever the one is that's close to, it's actually in Maryland. I think it's the Bald Friar one.
They're not there anymore. Baldfriar's not there anymore. Baldfriar, when they built the Conowingo Dam, they blasted all that. There's no
Okay.
Baldfriar. But there
Whichever
are-
one is still there, because apparently
Safe Harbor.
April knows somebody that can take us out.
Sure,
So-
that's Safe Harbor Dam, right below Safe Harbor Dam.
Okay.
The pieces of Bald Friar are at the Maryland Historic Trust.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right. And there are also a couple pieces in the Harford County Library, things like that.
Yes,
But
that's
Harford
right.
County
Okay.
Trust is where you would see the Baldfriar. They're really unique. They look like geometric fish. They're awesome to see.
Yes. In fact, some people think it is like a fishing weir. It was a symbol to show other people where to go fishing.
Could be.
And we'll continue to learn more about the Susquehanna River and the people who lived around it with the fishing weirs and eels in the May meeting. Is it May, Ilka?
May 19th, I think.
Yep. So we're going to learn.
Okay.
We'll continue to investigate and learn more about life along the Susquehanna, and they've had some ancient eel and fish weirs that have been uncovered, and we're going to learn about that too. So much to learn, so much to discover. Now that we all are smarter, we need to make other people smarter. So share what you have learned tonight with other people. And if you are interested in joining us as a member of the Archaeology Club or the Natural History Society, go to marylandnature.org and become a member. Remember, we're halfway to our birthday goal of 91 new and renewing members for April 2nd. And join us on April 2nd to learn all about Richard Stearns, one of the pioneers in Maryland and archaeology in general, and he happens to be in Maryland, and the curator for our society's archaeology collections for over 30 years. So please join us for that and many other things. And please stay safe and stay curious. We'll see you all back here soon.
Thank you very much, Debbie.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Bye,
Good night.
everybody.